Good morning, Park Place Church of God. I want to welcome everybody with us. I slightly hesitated, if I'm totally giving you full disclosure. That song at that moment is so amazing. I was hesitating ever so slightly to get just a little bit more of it squeaked out. No, I want to welcome everybody joining us here in the congregation and online on Facebook this morning. I just got a few short announcements. On the 22nd, so next Sunday, we will have Pastor Celester Neely joining us and speaking. On the following Sunday after that, May 29th, we will have James Swartz speaking for us. And then June 5th. So, Shelly and Clint, I'm sure you're watching. June 5th, I'm getting ready to announce, I'm pretty sure you're about halfway through your vacation right now. So just a reminder, June 6th or 5th, Shelly will be back and speaking that Sunday. So just want to get that out there. This Saturday, the other announcement I've got is for this Saturday, May 21st, here at the Fellowship Hall at the church between 2 and 5, we will be gathering to celebrate Vicki Taylor's birthday. So if you want to come and share lots of stories and hugs, make sure you let Teresa know so we can kind of get a heads up. And other than that, Brenda, would you open us up in prayer and we'll stand and worship? Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one that could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Isn't it a beautiful morning outside that God's blessed us with today? Let's lift this up. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you, oh Lord, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you, oh Lord, and I will not be give life. You are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give life. You are love. You bring light to the darkness. You are hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Thank you, Jesus. Great. Thank you. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Ushers, if you would, come forward. Kenny, will you bless the offering for us, please? this last one, the words to this one, I feel like is going to lead us into directly what Andrew is going to speak about today. So join me in this one as well. There's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather be than here in your love, here in your love. There's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather be than here in your love, here in your love. Set a fire down in my soul, and I can't contain when I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. Set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain and I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. Lord, thank you for gathering us here this morning on, like I said this earlier, this beautiful day that you have prepared for us. Lord, I ask that you now take our hearts and you spread them wide open for the message that Andrew has for us today. Lord, just let us continue to bathe in your presence from worship straight into a word, and just let us continue to carry that presence, not just through this service, but through the entire week and through the month and through the years to come. In your precious name, amen.
Good morning. Good morning, Park Place Church. It's so good to be with you this morning. My name's Andrew Gale. In many countries around the world, many cultures, before you have any kind of important conversation, you first have to connect somehow, talk about family, somehow make these kinds of connections that are really important. And oftentimes, as individualistic Americans, we quickly pass by all of that and just get to the important stuff. But I want to start by just showing a picture of my family when it gets up here in just a second, so that you know that I do have family, even though they could not be with me this morning. So I have a lovely wife named Autumn, and it's the very next slide. That's what we're going to talk about today, if you wanted to know that. So there's the intro. Lovely wife Autumn, 2 great kids. This is an older picture. Eleanor is now 10, and Eli is 5, almost 6. They're the best. I'm really disappointed they weren't able to join me this morning, but we actually attend church as well, and my wife is on kid duty this morning, so she's working in the littles class, and so she was unable to get out of that. Funny, we actually go to a church also called Park Place. So when I was getting ready to leave this morning, my son said, "Well, where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to preach at a church." And he said, "What church?" I said, "Park Place." And he goes, "You're preaching at our church?" And I said, "Well, no, it's another Park Place." So just to confuse him, it was fun to see his face. I just want to say, before I get started, thanks so much to Shelly Short. I hope you're enjoying your vacation. She said she would probably be watching this on the beach, which made me just mildly jealous. Although, when I first read that, it was raining here, and now it's gotten hot out. So it feels like maybe we could be on a beach if we just threw some sand in the ground. But I really appreciate you, Shelly, letting me come and, just get to have a conversation this morning with you all. So I work in an organization called Global Strategy. We'll see if this works. It does not. Global Strategy. Global Strategy is the international arm of Church of God Ministries, and we are your connection to the vast and expanding Church of God movement around the world. At Global Strategy, what our goal is to walk alongside the local church globally. And I know that sounds really simple. I'm going to kind of take that and explain what we mean by that here a little bit. But we walk alongside the local church globally. If you want to go to the next slide, And one of the places we get to do that in over 90 countries around the world. So this is just a quick map of the places where the Church of God that Park Place is a part of, the movement that we're a part of, has churches and communities and people in 90 countries around the world. You'll see the United States is highlighted here. Canada is not, because Canada does not fall under my purview. U.S. and Canada are its own thing. But we do have work in Native American ministries in the United States, and that does fall under my purview. But outside of that work, U.S. and Canada, every other country is what our organization works with. We have around 60 missionaries in 24 different countries. We go to the next slide. We have about 55 international development projects in 27 countries. But if there's one stat that I think is really important for you to remember this morning, because we all want to remember stats on a Sunday morning, right? That's what you came here for, is just more statistics. But one important stat is that 75% of the people that call themselves part of the Church of God movement live outside of the U.S. and Canada. And maybe you knew that, but if you didn't, I think it's important to realize that you're a part of a global movement. And so if you think the Church of God is connected here in the United States, imagine that 75% of the total Church of God is actually outside of those walls. So we partner with our global churches to help them become three different things: locally led and sustained, regionally connected, and missionally engaged. And that's on the next slide. We help support churches to connect with one another on national. Oh, no, that's the slide of the 75%. So there we go. There's the next slide. And we support the unique missional calling of all of these churches as they care for the communities where they're planted. We believe at Global Strategy that God has called every church, every person around the world to serve as Jesus did. And we partner with churches to help make that happen. This morning we're going to look just a little bit at the book of Ephesians before we tie in some of this Ephesians writing to the work that's happening today. So we're going to look at Ephesians 4 and then jump to Ephesians 5. So if you have your Bible or your phone or whatever it is that you use, I see iPads, yeah, whatever it is that you use to read, please grab those. We're going to start Ephesians 4, 1 through 6. And if you go to the next slide, I'm actually reading this from a version that'll probably be different than yours. It's the Message version, and the reason is because I like some of the language he uses here because it connects in with what we do. So in the Message version, Ephesians 4, 1 through 6 reads like this. In light of all this, here's what I want you to do. While I'm locked up here, a prisoner for the master, I want you to get out there and walk. Better yet, run on the road God called you to travel. I don't want any of you sitting around on your hands. I don't want anyone strolling off down some path that goes nowhere. And mark that you do this with humility and discipline, not in fits and starts, but steadily pouring yourselves out for each other in acts of love, alert at noticing differences and quick at mending fences. You are all called to travel on the same road and in the same direction, so stay together, both outwardly and inwardly. You have one master, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who rules over all, works through all, and is present in all. Everything you are and think and do is permeated with oneness. I love reading the passages sometimes in the Message because it just gives, some of these passages we've heard so many times that it's helpful for me to have a new perspective of the way to read that. Another reason I love this passage is that Global Strategy, we use that language of walking alongside the local church. We feel that our call, what we as an organization have been called to do, is to walk alongside the church to help them become locally led and sustained, regionally connected, and missionally engaged. Now, it's important to kind of put some background on this and some history. So the church has been growing and serving communities globally for a long time. If you go to the next slide, even in the Church of God specifically. So the movement we are a part of, we have churches that have been around for a long time. Just a really quick history, not that you need the history lesson, but most people date the beginning of the Church of God to around 1881, okay? So that gives you a little bit of background. We had churches that started in Mexico in 1891, okay? So just within 10 years of the Church of God starting here in the United States, we already had churches in Mexico. That's 130 years ago. I did the math a while ago. I don't remember if it's still 130 years. I preached this sermon probably a year ago, so maybe it's 132. I don't want to do the math in my head right now. England, we had churches starting in 1892, so just 11 years after. In India, in 1896. in Germany in 1901, in Russia in 1902, in Jamaica in 1907, in Japan in 1908. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. The reason I stop at 1908 is because it's important to know that what is now called Global Strategy was first called the Missionary Board of the Church of God, and it started in 1909. So the work of our missions work started in 1909, but we can already see a list of countries that had ministry that was happening before our organization even began. And some of these were started by missionaries, but a number of these, India being one of them, were started by nationals that heard about the work that was happening in the United States, and they brought the message of the Church of God movement, the holiness movement, to their country. The global Church of God has been around for a long time, and our goal at Global Strategy isn't to do the work of the local church. That's already happening before we got started, and it's going to continue long after us as an organization is gone. But our goal is to support the work that local church is already doing and to walk alongside them as they do that. So that's why I love this passage, because the author is telling us to walk, better yet, run together and to travel in the same road and in the same direction. It doesn't say we should lead people down the road. It doesn't say we should drag them behind us, but travel together. And that's what we do. And that's what you do when you partner with a missionary or a project around the world. When you support kids through Children of Promise, you are partnering with a long history of churches, and you're walking alongside those local churches. I know Kyle Hayes was with you last week. Kyle is a great friend. I know he shared about some of the incredible work that Children of Promise is doing. And we are so grateful to get to partner with Children of Promise around the world. So grateful for the work they do of bringing wholeness to kids. And we want to make sure that as they are caring and supporting for the whole life of a child, that child has a church that they can be connected to. We want to create healthy and whole churches that can be spaces for those kids to grow up in. Now, the theme of walking alongside in Ephesians is also in other places. And so I want to talk about that. We're gonna jump now to Ephesians 5, and we're now going to read from the NIV version, mostly because this just helps my preaching, because they use the words that I want them to use, not because there's any necessarily theological reason to read from the NIV, just because it supports what I want to say, as preachers often do, right? Okay, so this is what Ephesians 5, 1 through 2 says. Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Walk in the way of love. So here the author tells us not just to walk in the way of love, but what does it mean to walk in the way of love? Well, we're called to walk in the way of love, and the reason is not just because that's what we should do, it's in response to Christ's love and sacrifice for us. The same theme actually continues again later on in verse 8. So if you're tracking along, verse 8 says, "For you were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light." So if you're reading that passage, you're probably first going, I thought he was talking about walking. I don't see any reference to walking in that passage. And that's true. In the NIV translation and most of our English translations, they translate this word as live. But if you actually get back to the Greek, the word live is actually the word walk. The translators just decided it didn't make as much sense as using the word live. The Greek word is the word peripateo, peri meaning all around or encompassing, pateo meaning to tread on. So it means to walk around. So a more literal translation might be, "For you were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light." One of the reasons I want to bring this up is because we miss the beauty of this. Paul, the author of Ephesians, is weaving this idea of walking with all through Ephesians, but often because of the way that it gets translated, we actually miss that language. And the author continues on with this theme of walking throughout the chapter. So walking in the way of love, walking as children of light, but that's actually still not it. If you go down to verse 15 through 17, this is what it says. "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." Once again, the author continues to use this theme of walk. In English, we continue to translate it as the word live. but it is actually the word walk. So the author writes, be very careful then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. Be careful how you walk. So in order, the author is encouraging us to, one, walk in the way of love as Christ has loved us. And walk as children of light. And not just that, but be careful how you walk as wise, not unwise. So this leads me back to our identity as an organization, as an organization that walks alongside the local church. We support them in the ministry God has called them to, and we see the good that's already there, the good work that God's already doing, and we want to join in that work with them. And we do this in three distinct ways around the world. First, we help global churches become locally led and sustained. So you want to go right to the next slide, that would be great. Locally led and sustained. At Global Strategy, we want to raise up local leaders and help churches find local funding to engage in ministry. So churches come in all sizes. If you want to go ahead and skip ahead, I know those are just explanation, but I already did that. So this is my good friend Esteban and his wife. Esteban is a pastor in Tela, Honduras. It's a city, well, if you ever want to go there, I can tell you where it is. It's just north of San Pedro Sula, a few hours from La Ceiba, where the main Church of God campus is. He's a church planter, and him and his wife, and this is technically his carport that also doubles as their church. So on Sunday mornings, a number of folks gather in this church to worship. If you'll go to the next slide. Yep, so there we go. Esteban Church. This is the main campus in La Ceiba. Esteban actually was a pastor here at this church as well. This church can see a couple hundred people every Sunday. They have multiple services. It's a huge church, bursting at the seams. This is actually taken during COVID, so they had to have the seats a certain distance apart. But when I've been there before, it is just packed with people. It's a lively church service. There is dancing and music, and it is an incredible experience, but very different than what Esteban's church does on a Sunday morning in his carport. And I show this to say that no two churches are alike, even two churches in the same country. And so at Global Strategy, we have distinct ways that we help churches to find ways to support the ministry that God has called them to, ways that are distinct for each of the churches that we get to partner with. For this community, they've actually found a way to sustain their churches through a Honduras entrepreneurial school. So this entrepreneurial school was birthed out of a reality that people in their community, in the community of this church, were not able, in their community, had gifts and skills they were not able to utilize, but they thought that they could harness them as sources of income. So they started this school. It's a 1-year-long training, weekly training that pairs faith and spiritual formation with practical business skills. And the leadership said to me that they don't want to just have good businesses that support people. They want Christians who run businesses in ethical ways to be a light to other businesses in the community. This program was completely started by the local church, but we've been able to come alongside to raise money through a project that helps fund some of the startup costs for some of these businesses. So let me tell you some of the businesses they do. One person was a trained ballet dancer, so she opened a dance studio, and she also sells dance merchandise so that churches in the area can come and get their liturgical dance material from her. One person started a car repair shop that specializes in repainting. Another person started a mobile app. This is way above my ability to even comprehend, but I'm going to attempt to try to explain it. But started a mobile app that is an app that you can... It's called Errands in English, but where you can say things that you need from the store, and someone will go on a motorbike and pick it up and bring it to you. And of course, they started it. I think a grace for them is they started just before COVID. And so as everything shut down and people did not want to go out, they boomed. Their company exploded. They now have 25 employees. They're the second largest app that delivers things outside of Uber in their city. But there are smaller businesses as well. These are some pictures of some of the local businesses. On the left-hand picture, on the right side, are hot sauces. that this guy makes. He gets his own peppers and then makes hot sauces. They're fantastic. If you like hot sauce, they are very hot. On the right side is a churro shop and juices. There's a bakery. There's a couple that wants to start making clothes. The churro shop actually is just down the street from the school, which is a really great place to put a churro shop with snacks. And all of the money that comes from this shop actually supports, goes back right into the church, into the church's ministries. But what I love about this is it grew out of a desire to care for their neighborhood. And it was created, this whole business apparatus has created a sense of hope and expectancy in the community. And they've done other things over the years. They actually saw that there was not adequate education for kids. The public schools were not really providing good education, and the private schools that were there were way too expensive for their families to go to. So they created this in-between that's a little bit more than just what the cost of a public school was, but not as expensive as the private schools. And they have K through 12, where they're doing Christian education for hundreds of kids in their community. They saw that mental health was an issue, so they started a counseling session where they sent people to get their master's in counseling and then hired them on at the church and have counseling sessions for kids, because people in their community did not have affordable access to counseling services. This church sees their neighbors, and they are walking with them. They're walking in the way of love, as that Ephesians passage says. They are living love out in tangible ways, and because of the love and sacrifice they've experienced in Jesus, they're able to walk in that way of love as Christ loved them. Okay, second, so locally led and sustained, we also help churches be regionally connected. By the way, one of the things I love to do is just tell stories. So I am just going to tell some stories like I just did. So I hope that you appreciate that. Or if you don't, just let your mind wander. So at Global Strategy, we believe that creativity and accountability are present when churches are together at national and regional level. So if you want to go to the next slide, let's see what I have. Oh, that's more delicious stuff that we got to enjoy. We actually got to eat the churros, which was phenomenal. Okay. Regionally connected. And you can click through and get those next two little bullet points there. Or next one. Yeah, there we go. So one story of regional connectivity comes out of Europe. In Europe, the Church of God has a lot of countries where there is maybe only one or two congregations. As you probably read, Europe is a very post-Christian continent. So there aren't a lot of churches in general. And some of those churches are in cities where there is definitely not another Church of God, but may not even be another church present. And that's why a number of years ago, some of our missionaries in Europe and the Middle East started what's called the Three Worlds Leadership Network, which brings together young leaders from across the region, people that are interested in ministry, engaged in ministry, for a time of worship, learning, and encouragement. And I heard a story from one of those leaders, one of the young leaders that came to this event, that kind of put this in perspective for me. I was speaking to a young leader, he was probably in his 20s at the time, and he said that he had never been in a room with other Christians his age that were not his family. He had never been in a room with other Christians his age that were not his family. And that kind of blew my mind, because I grew up going to not only a church that had a large youth group, but I also went to state youth conventions. I mean, I was able to be in rooms with other Christians my age very easily. And so ministry made sense for me because I had other people that I could process that with. I had friends that they went to other churches, but they were also passionate about ministry. And so that was never something that I had trouble connecting with other people about. But many of our leaders in Europe do not have those opportunities. Again, they may be the only congregation in their city. And they may be in a congregation that's made up mostly of their family. So the idea of having somebody to process ministry with, to talk about the challenges and the wonders and the good and the bad and the ugly that come with being a part of ministry, they did not have those support systems. And so if you go to the next slide, so when they started the Three Worlds Leadership Network and they brought these leaders, these young 20s, 30s leaders together, it was the first time for many of them to be in a room with other Christians their age that were not their family, that also were passionate about ministry. They were able to encourage one another. They were able to worship together. They actually have a Facebook group where they stay connected to one another. They share prayer requests. You can imagine that during this recent experience with Russia and Ukraine, where there are Ukrainians and Russians that are in this picture, that this group became a place where they were able to bond together. Their tagline for their group is, "You are not alone." And I've seen that posted all over with this group, especially during this Ukraine war that's currently happening. People that feel alone, that feel disconnected, were able to find connection. I'm reminded of the passage in Ephesians that says that we should travel on the same road in the same direction. And sometimes that's easier said than done, but when we connect with one another, when we create opportunities for people to hear one another and encourage one another, we have a chance to learn what it means to truly work together. And I'm also reminded of that part in Ephesians that says we need to walk as wise and not as unwise. I don't know about you, but I feel like I make more wise decisions when I have others to process with. Regional connections offer opportunities for us to connect with one another, to walk together in the same direction, to truly hear one another, and with God's grace, to make the most of every opportunity. Lastly, we help churches become missionally engaged. We believe that the church is called to impact the community outside of its walls. There are so many places where this is happening. Our churches are engaged in all kinds of ministries. Hospitals where amputees receive prosthetics on a weekly basis. They're doing new prosthetics. Building water wells for communities. We have stories of water wells that literally were put in a place between two warring communities, and the ability to bring them together through this water well. We have schools, from preschools to high schools to seminary degrees, training up leaders. We have schools that specialize in special education, special needs training for kids that aren't given priority in their public schools. We have refugee ministry in the inner city of Paris. I could tell you hundreds of stories of the good God is doing through the Church of God around the world. But I want to end with one story about the church in Pakistan, where I actually got to visit and see the work just this last October. So here's a picture of Samuel George and me. Samuel George is our leader for the church in Pakistan. The church there, Pakistan, which borders Afghanistan and India, in a very contentious part of the world. They have 263 churches, nearly 130 pastors, and 75,000 believers. They're a part of the church there. They live in a country that keeps them from sharing their faith openly, but they still serve their communities with a deep sense of Christ's love. A few months ago, they handed out rations. I think I have a picture potentially next. Yeah. They handed out rations to 320 Afghan refugee families living in Karachi. So that when everything happened in Afghanistan last August and many people fled, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan is porous, and so many Christians, Muslims, people of all faith backgrounds were flooding across into Pakistan. Technically, the church is only allowed to help Christians. That is the legal thing that Pakistan says. So Samuel George went to a community where he knew they were Christians, but he made it very clear that he was going to be helping whoever was there. And so we're confident that we certainly helped Christians, but that he probably also was showing Christ's love to Muslims who were fleeing for their lives. They care for, on top of that, they also care for a community of indentured servants who are unable to escape their work. They have George Theological School, if you go on to the next slide, where they are educating leaders in the church, for the church. I was actually there for graduation. It was an incredible, incredible event. The churches where I visited were lively and joyful, even amidst the challenges of discrimination they face daily. The next slide, we were at a church, and they were very joyful and lively, and their electricity went out. And it was incredible how quickly everyone's cell phone lights came on. It was very obvious that this was not a new occurrence, that they probably deal with their electricity being taken out often. But very quickly, things just continued on as if nothing had happened. As I try to do when I travel, I got to listen to some stories from people in Pakistan. This is Razia Mushtaq. She runs George Theological School. She's the youth leader at her home church. She has a passion to teach people the Bible. She wants to get her PhD. She's especially interested in the Old Testament, loves the Old Testament. But if you can imagine, in a country where women have very little rights, she is pushing against all of the cultural boundaries. She never got married because she knew if she got married, she wouldn't be able to be the kind of pastor that she wanted to be. So she's chosen to be single and continue on in the ministry she feels God's called her to. I got to sit down and hear her story where she shares about actually having a dream and a vision of Jesus calling her into ministry. It is a powerful testimony of the good God is doing. It is just a slight plug. If you go to the next slide, A World of Good is the podcast where we actually share these stories. If you ever want to go hear stories about what God's doing around the world, you can find this online. We can share information on how to get that. But we share these stories like Razia's. She was one we just shared this a few months ago, of the good God is doing. I even brought information about Drew and Sunny Brown and their 2 kids. They are raising funds. They're going to go live in Karachi and work with the church in Pakistan. They're currently in the fundraising process. But this is one of the many ways that we walk alongside the local church, knowing that there's a church in Pakistan that is doing all of this ministry, that's being pulled in all different directions. We can send a family that can be a part of connecting with them, supporting them, not to do the ministry, but to partner in the ministry that's already happening. To me, these communities exemplify what it means to be light, and to be light in dark places. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. At Global Strategy, we walk alongside the local church globally, and we want you to be a part of that. You can help make this global ministry happen. Our missionaries and projects depend on prayer and financial support from our churches in the United States. Your prayers and support of missionaries and projects helps the church around the world find ways to raise up leaders, connect them with one another, and serve outside the walls of their church. You are part of stories and ministry that is happening all over the world. I want to end with one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite authors, Henry Nouwen, as I think this just exemplifies what we're called to, but what we're all called to. What we're called to at Global Strategy, but we're all called to as Christians. Jesus' whole life was a witness to his Father's love. And Jesus calls his followers to carry on that witness in his name. We, as followers of Jesus, are sent into this world to be visible signs of God's unconditional love. Thus, we are not first of all judged by what we say, but by what we live. When people say of us, "See how they love one another," they catch a glimpse of the kingdom of God that Jesus announced and are drawn to it as by a magnet. In a world so torn apart by rivalry, anger, and hatred, we have the privileged vocation to be living signs of a love that can bridge all divisions and heal all wounds. Let me read that last sentence again. In a world so torn apart by rivalry, anger, and hatred, we have the privileged vocation to be living signs of a love that can bridge all divisions and heal all wounds. Let's pray together. God, thank you today for the opportunity to gather. We do not take that lightly, knowing that Christians around the world may not have that same opportunity. God, we think of our brothers and sisters around the world who are being lights to their communities, who are caring for those around them, and who are doing it in terribly difficult situations. God, today I want to specifically pray for our Church of God family in Ukraine, those that have had to flee and those that have stayed. I pray for safety. God, I pray for our church in Pakistan that is welcoming Afghan refugees, that is supporting them and caring for them. God, I pray for the church in Myanmar, where leaders have had to live in the church for the last year because that was the only way they would be able to worship together as their country is under military rule. God, I pray for churches in Latin America like the church in Honduras that is being a light to their community, that's seeing places where they can impact their neighborhood, and they're following you in that. God, I pray that as we go from here, we would not quickly forget the stories of the good that you're doing, and that you would continue to bring those to our minds so that we can be in prayer for them. We are beautifully connected and interconnected with our brothers and sisters around the world. Help us to be advocates for them in the ways that we talk and engage with those that we come in contact with. And help us to encourage them through our prayers. God, thank you for this time. We ask this all in the powerful name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. I will be in the lobby, and one of the things that I would love for you to come and get from me, if I can get it off of this. Oh man, this magnetized real well. These are very good magnets. We have these little magnets here that say pray for the global church as just a reminder of those around the world that you're connected to, that are part of your family. If you want to put this on your refrigerator as a reminder as you open the door to get your milk in the morning or creamer for your coffee, whatever it is that you do, that you would be able to say a prayer for those people that are around the world serving their communities well in the name of Christ. Thank you so much for letting me join you this morning. So grateful.